Welcome back to No Code Devs. In today's video, we're going to build an entire web app from scratch. We're going to build a backend with BuildShip and then tie together the front end using WeWeb and different API calls. This is a super quick tutorial, just about 15 minutes, and it's beginner friendly. You don't have to have any experience with code or APIs to get this working. Let's dive in and show you how it all works. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, drop your comments in the comment section, and subscribe to our channel if you want to see more videos like this one. Okay, let's go ahead and jump right in. Today, we're going to be using BuildShip to build the backend part of our app. BuildShip is a super cool tool. It's low code, it's visual, and it's powered by AI. They have all kinds of different integrations, and you can really do a ton with BuildShip. One of the things that I really love about it, being non-technical, is they have a bunch of pre-built templates in their library of templates already for us. So we can start with one of those and build some really powerful apps just with their pre-built templates. But aside from that, I would highly recommend you check it out. Again, they have a ton of integrations from Stripe to Slack to Firebase. So there's a lot that you can do with BuildShip. We're just going to be scratching the surface here with this small app that we're going to build with BuildShip and WeWeb. So I'm going to go ahead and log in, and I don't have any projects here at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate down to templates. Now, as I mentioned before, there's a ton of different templates here. They have AI templates, utility templates, bot templates, database templates, and on. There's all kinds of really things you can do just from their templates, and we're going to show you that today. So what we'll go ahead and do is we'll search for screenshot. And they have this node pre-built, which is screenshot URL. Create a full page screenshots of any URL. So this is perfect. We're going to go ahead and click this. And what it's going to do is it's going to bring up this flow that really does everything that we need. And we don't even need to modify it, which is super cool. So what's happening here is we're setting up a REST API call as a GET request, and we can name this whatever we like. So let's call it screenshot URL. And what's going to happen is it's going to set the query parameter as URL, and I'll show you what that means in a minute. And then it's got all these pre-built nodes that's basically going to screenshot the URL and generate a public file path that's hosted for us so that we can get the end result. And I'll show you what that means. So as I said, this is set up for us. Of course, we can add additional steps or additional nodes. Like one thing that we could do if we wanted is we could say sheet, Google Sheets, add a row. We could potentially add a row in Google Sheets for every screenshot that we took. So we have it all set up in Google Sheets. We're not going to do that, but I just want to show you how easy it is to add a step to your workflow here. This one being Google Sheets. So I'll go ahead and delete that. So once your app is set up, what you can actually do is go up to this blue button here and hit ship. And what this is going to do is just going to compile our app and build it. And it's going to give us an API endpoint that we can use to test our app. And we're going to take that over to Postman and test it in just a second. So just like that, it was shipped successfully. The workflow was successfully deployed. And you can actually export the API as JSON or YAML. I'll show you what that looks like here. So you can export this as JSON or YAML. We're not going to do that. We're actually just going to take this endpoint here and we're going to copy it in our browser. Next, we're going to head over to Postman, which is just an API testing tool. And we're going to use this just to test to make sure that our endpoint is working successfully. So all I need to do is hit the plus button here. And if you remember here, this is a GET request. So we want to make sure this is set to GET, which it already is. And we can paste the URL here. Now, to actually test this, we have to pass in the URL of the website we want to get a screenshot for. So I'm just going to do a question mark equals HTTP, make this lowercase, HTTPS on www. Let's just do product hunt, producthunt.com. And as you can see, it's passing in this URL as a value here. So let's go ahead and send this and see what happens. Okay, query URL is required. So I think I did something wrong here. Oh, I think I have the question mark in the wrong place. So we can just put the question mark there. We can make this URL. Let's just make it lowercase. And let's try this again. We're going to go ahead and send this, send request. It says that the workflow was not found. Make sure you've deployed it with the trigger and use the get method and path to screenshot. Okay, so here's what's going on. I actually have the wrong URL here. So this screenshot URL. So we want to do a screenshot URL, and now we can send this. It should work. I think it's good to see some of these troubleshooting steps because sometimes you might get an error. So if you do, you just need to make sure that you don't have any typos and that everything is set up correctly. So we got a result back already, and the result that we got back is set up here where we just get a return of the download URL. So here's a return of the download URL. We can actually copy this and paste it into our browser just to see what this looks like. And there it is. This is really high quality screenshot of producthunt.com. And we get the entire page. So from the header all the way down to the footer. So super cool. In the next part of this video, what we're going to do is we're actually going to build a front-end app in WeWeb based on this workflow where a user can enter the URL. And then what's going to happen is it's going to cause this workflow to run by doing a fetch API request. And then we're going to show the end result, which will be the screenshot, back to the user. So we'll jump into that right now. Okay, let's get going with part 2 here. We're going to be using WeWeb to build a front end for our app. WeWeb is a no-code front-end builder that you can actually use to build on top of any backend. So this could be like Xano, this could be Airtable, or it could be an API. In the case today, we're going to be connecting to the BuildShip API to build our front end. Super cool, very powerful, and we'll be able to get our app up and running in just a matter of minutes. I'm going to go ahead and log in, and I'm at my dashboard here. I'm going to actually go ahead and create a new project. They do have some templates, but I'm just going to start from scratch here. We'll go ahead and call it new test, and we're going to go ahead and click create project. Here we go. We've got our project called new test. I'm going to go ahead and open the editor. And what we're going to be looking at here is just a completely blank screen. This is where our web page would live. If we click this button, add, you can see that you can add all the kind of elements you would expect in a page, like sections and divs and lists and tables and images and buttons and icons and so on and so forth. We'll be doing some of that, but for right now, we actually want to build our workflow and connect to the API to make sure that we're able to successfully connect to the API and that we can connect the front end to the actions on the API. And I'll show you how that'll work. So I'm going to click out of this. And on the left-hand side here, we have these arrows where we can fly out this menu where we have 3 options: layout, which is just our web page; data, this is where you would add your database; and then we have actions where we build global workflows. There aren't any workflows here now, so I'm going to go ahead and click new workflow. By default, workflows trigger on execution, which you don't really need to know what that means right now because we'll be able to trigger this workflow with another workflow actually, which would be when a button is submitted on the website. It's super easy, but I just want to let you know that the only sort of trigger here is on execution, and we need to add an action. So we're going to go ahead and click that. Under actions here, there's a ton of different things that you can do, from fetching collections to variables to time delays, uploading files, run JavaScript. There's a lot you can do. We're not going to get into all that, but you can build super powerful apps here in their workflows by stringing a bunch of these different actions together. What I'm going to do though, before we do that, is I'm actually going to go over to our data and I'm actually going to add a new collection. So let me go ahead and click new. We can call this collection BuildShip. Folder, none. Source, we actually want to choose REST API. They have all kinds of different data sources, as you can see, from Airtable to RSS to Supabase. There's a ton you can do, but we're just going to go ahead and choose REST API. We're going to click add, and that's all we need to do here. So now if we come back to our actions on our entitled workflow, we hit add action, we now see that there's a REST API request action available. So we're going to go ahead and click that. Once we click that, there's this menu on the right here where we can set up our REST API request. We need a couple things here to get this set up. If you remember from when we tested this app in Postman, the type of request here is a GET request. Come back here just to confirm this. Yes, it is a GET request. And this is our endpoint URL. So we need to actually go ahead and copy that endpoint URL and we can paste it in right here. Coming back to BuildShip, we remember that our query key parameter is just URL. So we can actually add this query string parameter as URL. And then the value will actually be the value that we get from the front end user on the form. But for now, we just want to test this to make sure it works. So we can use any URL. I'll put in producthunt.com right here. And then that's everything that we need. So this should work. Let's go ahead and click test. And as you can see on the left-hand side here, you actually get access to the logs. So you can see what's happening in real time. And just like that, it worked. We can see that it succeeded and it gave us back this value, which is just a URL. We can actually copy this and paste this into another browser, and we should see the big screenshot here of producthunt.com, which is super cool. So just like that, we built a tiny little workflow that makes a REST API request, and we got back a value. Getting back the value is great, but there's one more step that we need to do, which is save this value as a variable in our app. And I'll show you how to do that. So let's close out of this. And if we go to the data tab, we have collections, which would be our data sources, which we don't have because we actually added just an API request in a global workflow as an action. But then we have these variables, which are things that we can save from our API request. So let's just go ahead and click a new variable. We can give it a name. Let's just call this image URL. You can name this whatever you want. What type of variable is this? It could be an array. It could be a number, Boolean, all these types of things. It's just a URL, so it's just text. And the default value we can leave blank, preserve on navigation, sure. Save a local storage, no. We can just go ahead and click create. So now we have this variable called image URL, which is great. If we head back over to our action tabs and go to our workflow, what we can do here is we can add an action step here to our existing workflow. What we want to do, we can search for variable and we can choose change variable value. Let's go ahead and do that. And again, once we add this action step, we get a menu over here to the right. So what do we want to do? We want to change a variable value. And which variable do we want to change? We want to change the image URL. Now, where do we get this value? What we can do here is we can enter a value manually if we would like, but better than that, we want to actually set the value as what we get back from this REST API request. So we can actually bind this data by clicking this little plug icon here. And we can see here, if we navigate over to the lightning bolt tab, which is our workflows, which makes sense, we can actually see that we can bind it to the result from action step one. So let's go ahead and do that. But we can actually just choose action result. And you can see the current value is this image URL. And that's exactly what we want. So what's going on here? Just to recap, we're making a REST API request to BuildShip with just this default URL of producthunt.com. And then we're actually changing this variable value to just be the image URL because we'll need that later whenever we display the image to the front end user. And that's really all that we need right now for this workflow. We can actually just go build our very simple app and show you how this all works. So let's close out of our workflow here and get to our website, which essentially has nothing in it. What we can do here is we can add an element and we can just choose form. And we actually want to choose form container. And we can drag this right into our page. And we have this sort of like very basic form where there's a short answer and a submit button, which is great. This is going way to the edge of the page. So if you wanted to click into this element, you could style this however you want, but we could add padding on the left and the right. Let's just say 50, and actually maybe on the top to add like 150 pixels. So now our form is a little bit easier to see, which is great. This is not going to be a front-end design tutorial, so we're just going to make this app work. But as you can see, you can style this however you want. Okay, so great. So now that we have this sort of form, we want to add one more thing, which is basically going to be our image that we're going to show back to the users. So let's go ahead and add that element now. We can actually just hit add and then back out the word form here. Just search for image. Great. They have an image element, so we can drop that in here. This is really big right now, but we'll work on getting this to look a little bit better here in a second. What I want to show you though is if we click this image, we can actually bind this image to a variable in our app. So we're going to bind this image to the image variable that we set from our workflow. So we click the image, and on the right-hand side here, we have these settings. And right now the default image is just this no image file. But if we click the plus button again, we can actually access the variables in our app. Now, this is where we go to this little X, and from the project, this is our variable image URL. So if we click this, it's going to bind this image to whatever the current value is for our image URL variable, and we'll test this to make sure that it works. Okay, so right now it's just showing a broken image because there is no image set in this variable. But as we fill out this sort of form, we will show you how this works and how we can set this image URL variable. Okay, so we have set this image to be connected to the image URL variable. So we can just click out of this. And then the next thing that we want to do is we want to have something happen when the user submits the form. So how do we do that? If we come over here to our layout panel and we click the form container. Now this is a little bit tricky, but you want the action or the workflow to happen on the form container, not on the submit button. This is like a WeWeb thing. But for whatever reason, what we want to do is we want to select the form container here rather than the actual submit button, which might seem like the intuitive thing to click. So we're going to choose form container. Then we head on over to the right. We can go over to this lightning bolt, which is our workflows on this element. So what we can do is we can add a workflow on this element. We can click new. And as you can see now, because it's on the form container, it knows when the action item is on submit. So that's the trigger. So when the form is submitted, what do we want to have happen? This is super easy. All that we want to do is we want to trigger a workflow. So let's just see if we can find that. Yep. I just typed work and the option is execute workflow. If you remember at the beginning, we set up that global workflow, which would make the REST API call. So let's go ahead and choose that. And once again, we get this menu on the right-hand side where we can choose our workflow. And we didn't name our workflow, but we only have one workflow, so it's entitled workflow. And we went ahead and chose that here. So what's happening? Whenever the button is submitted, it's actually going to run this global workflow, which should work. Now we've done everything that we need to do here, except one thing, which is actually get the answer from the user. So the URL that the user passes through into this form and connect that dynamically to our API call. So let me show you how to do that real quick. What I'm going to do is I'm actually in WeWeb, they have this sort of like editor and then this preview mode. I'm going to go into preview mode and I'm actually just going to paste in producthunt.com here. And I'm just going to go ahead and click submit. Now nothing's happening, but what this does is it puts this value into the form. So if we go back to the editor here, we can go to our actions and then our global workflow. And where we're making our API call in this first step, you remember initially we just put in this sort of default domain of producthunt.com, but this won't work because we need to grab whatever the user submits and make the API call on that domain. I'll back this out. And once again, we're going to hit this plus button and we can see here the short answer value in the form is now exposed. Now we just typed in, it happens to be the same domain, producthunt.com. But if they typed in AOL.com or WeWeb.com, this value would be here. So let's go ahead and just bind this. So whatever the short answer value is, it's going to append that to the URL on the API, which is super, super cool. So let's go ahead and leave that as it is. We can close out of this and come back to our app. Now, if I go into the preview mode of our app and refresh the page, what we're going to see here is just this broken image. We're going to have the option to put in a URL. Let's just say AOL.com, and then we can actually submit this here. Now, this is super basic. There's all kinds of different things you can do, but let's go ahead and submit this and just see what happens. It might take a second here for this to run and work and get back a value, but hopefully it should work and we should see shortly here a screenshot for AOL.com, which we are seeing. Now this is super huge and it doesn't look great because it's so big and it's not formatted, but this app is working. We can now ask the user to submit a URL. We can put some helper text up here, name our app, all this kind of stuff, ask for the URL, have them hit submit, and then they get back this nice screenshot of AOL.com. Now, some things that you might want to do right away is click this image and we can go into the pencil settings and maybe we want to set some size settings on this image, like the max width could be 500. This is already starting to look a lot better, maybe 700. Okay, that looks pretty good. The mid width would be 500, which isn't going to affect anything here. This is starting to look a lot better. We can run this again just to see what this looks like. We can do BuildShip. I believe it's BuildShip.com, right? Yep, okay. Want to make sure I have the right domain. We can hit submit. If we were building a real app here, what we would do is we'd reset the variables when the submit button is pressed so that the image goes away and they're not seeing the old image. We could also put a loader here so that while the API call is running, there is something loading here. So it lets the user know that the app is working. But this is working successfully. We have built a BuildShip backend and we've connected it to a WeWeb front end, and we're making API calls for the end user in real time. Super, super cool. I hope that this taught you something and it gave you some exposure as to how you can build real world apps with tools like BuildShip and WeWeb. So if you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the comments. If you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any future videos like this one.